Good afternoon, Guyana, and thank you once again for joining us on Recount to Watch Update. My name is Hugh Todd, and today we have Mr. Charles Ramson, one of our national candidates, a former member of parliament, and an attorney at law. No stranger to Guyana. He has been very vocal, a very strong and leading member within the People's Progressive Party Civic. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramson, for joining us today.
Thank you, Hugh. It's a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon to everyone.
Okay, so as you know, we're in day 12. We're still some ways to go. We're lagging in terms of our output, and that is of a major concern, not only to us in the People's Progressive Party Civic, but to the international observers and to Guyanese across Guyana. So, given the fact that we're still to declare Region 1, we're just about 15% of Region 4, which is the highly contested region, and we are not yet certain whether or not we will get an expansion in terms of the recount stations. What are your views so far, looking at the process from the time it started to today? With particular attention on the slothfulness.
Yeah, I do have my deep concerns about the sloth of the process, simply because as the process takes a long time to conclude, it takes a long time, first of all, to be able to have a resolution to this saga, and also it's disturbing as well that the Elections Commission has agreed unanimously that there should be an expansion of the number of workstations in order to accelerate the program, the Recount program. And so far, we've seen that the body which should be giving its permission, which is the National Task Force headed by political leaders of the AP and UAFC, has not given their permission so far. And we have heard David Granger on many occasions say that he is giving GCOM all the facilities necessary in order to be able to complete this recount. Well, of course, it's not only to be able to complete the recount, it's to be able to complete the recount in an expeditious, transparent, and credible way. And so if you are seeing that your National Task Force is holding back the expeditious delivery of a credible and transparent result, which GCOM agrees unanimously that it should have expanded workstations, then you are in effect, and your government is in effect, slowing down the process of giving us that result. That's number one. Number two, as it relates to the COVID pandemic, which I've heard David Granger speak about today at his visit, there are 2 points I'd like to make. Number one, the most important thing that could be done immediately in order to address this COVID pandemic is to be able to get a legitimate government in place. And I say that because there is a lot of funding that is waiting for developing countries to access immediately. And one of the reasons why we have not been able to get the funding that we desire, we're a small population, so we don't need trillions of dollars in order to be able to give us the kind of funding that we need to effectively put measures in place to constrain and restrict the spread of COVID-19. We have not been able to get access to that funding simply because we do not have a legitimate government in place. So the number one thing that we could do immediately is to be able to get a legitimate government in place so that we can access the funding that's available so that we can address the spread of the COVID disease and the virus that leads to the disease.
Yes. And as you go ahead.
Second thing that he said at the Arthur Chung Conference Center today was that COVID-19 is real, and because of that, he denied the Carter Center from coming into the country. Now, we know that the COVID pandemic is real. Nobody is trying to deny that the COVID pandemic is real, but you had given the CARICOM team the permission to come here so that they could scrutinize the process. Well, in order for them to come here, they had to observe particular protocols to ensure that they themselves do not have any traces of COVID-19. And what we have seen too is that there have been about 300-400 persons congregating at the Artichung Convention Center, and not a single person has contracted or been inflicted with COVID-19, which means that the area itself, the work area itself, and the persons who are working there, they are, for the better part, I would say that they're safe and that there's no risk there of any kind of spread of disease of the COVID-19. So if you were really, if you really wanted to, President Granger could have allowed the Carter Center to return to Guyana so that they could be part of the International Observer Mission, which they are accredited to do, and complete their mission. Now, why is that important? Just so that we could get a clear idea, is that we want, after this shenanigans that has gone on over the last few months, that has led to accusations and a lot of the international community to lead to statements saying that the declaration for Region 4 is not credible. You will want as many persons as possible to give their validity and validation, authentication of this election result. Otherwise, you are constraining their ability to be able to pronounce effectively on the credibility of the election.
It seems as if Mr. Granger is more in favor of CARICOM giving oversight or supervisory, playing the key supervisory role. And as we know, over the last several elections, the Carter Center has been one of the primary stakeholders in this process. That being so, because they are the ones who actually led the transition based on the formula that they would have helped to develop along with us here in Guyana. So I think it's pretty saddening that they've been disinvited and they're not here. Be that as it may, we have to carry on with the process because time is of essence. The people of Guyana are actually very anxious. Some are very nervous because they want to see this process come to a smooth ending so that we can have a transition of government and for us to be able to move the economy forward. Moving on to the next question I want you to address, Charles, is the fact that we're still awaiting a decision from the National COVID Task Force, which is headed by Moses Nagamoto, CEO being Joe Harmon and others from the party. Do you sense that there's any administrative delay, or there may be some amount of political interference in terms of getting them to be able to make a decision that would allow for more stations to be put in place so that we can actually advance the process to improve our output? What are your views?
Look, I've been in this game for a long time, so I know that many times, you don't have to tell people what to do in order to get a decision that you expect to have, because you would have chosen the people very carefully for particular positions, and they would have been of a particular ilk and of a particular thinking. So in a scenario where this is a national task force, and we have seen that the government has been politicizing COVID-19, and when I heard Valda Lawrence speak yesterday about that they have not been politicizing COVID-19, I would like to dispute that conclusively with this particular instance, which shows me that they have been using COVID-19 as a political weapon just so that they can advance their political fortunes. So the week of the elections, actually it was a Saturday or a Friday, one of those days. The election was on the Monday, maybe it was Saturday or Friday. Valda Lawrence wrote to Kemraj Ramjitan and asked him and requested him that he would close the Suriname backtrack border and the Suriname ferry border terminal for 1 week. After that week was done, they then reopened the border, the backtrack, the terminals. Even though the cases of COVID-19 was increasing, they did that during the election with the hope that if there were any persons who were living in Suriname who would be coming back over to Guyana to vote, they would stop them and reduce the numbers in the Berbice area or wherever they were registered to vote. So this government has been politicizing and weaponizing the use of COVID-19 so that they can advance their political fortunes. So I generally don't believe that the response from the COVID-19 team is going to come back to say that we could have more workstations. We must be prepared that they're going to refuse it, but we know that that would have probably been their intention all along, because the government never wanted this recount. And we know that because we saw many of their candidates, they've even taken the case to court to stop the recount. Yulita Moore was a candidate for the APN UFC in 2018 or 2019, whatever year it was. She was a candidate for the APN UFC. I understand she works at the foreign ministry as a liaison officer. She was the one that brought the case to block the recount. So they never wanted this recount all along. You would have heard many people saying that, including Roycedale Ford. Roycedale Ford, on many occasions, giving interviews saying that the recount is not the means by which they can address the election concern about the fraudulent declaration for Region 4. Even up to today and yesterday and all the interviews that they do, that's the reason why you're hearing Basil Williams up to yesterday say that he doesn't believe that the recount is valid, is legally is legal.
Yes, and that's where we have the shifting narrative, because all along the APNO AFC, they openly accepted Mengo's declaration. They were championing the fact that the elections was free, fair, and credible, and they wanted a swift swearing in. Now we are seeing a shifting of the narrative. They have also sent a dossier headed by Joe Harmon and David Patterson. They're the two signatories representing the APNO AFC, where they also said that the elections was free, fair, and credible. Now there's a lot of confusions. Many people are saying different things, but the general analysis here is that they're saying basically that there are too many irregularities during the process, and that may cast some amount of doubt on the validity of the results, so that they're trying to bring to bear on the people of Guyana and the international community that, hey, these elections, after all, might not have been one of any substance, and we may need to revisit this whole issue of the recount, because clearly it's showing a lot of issues. We know from our end that that is not so, because we know what a recount is. We go back to the ballot boxes, we count back each and every ballot, and we use that to determine the winner of the elections, and that will represent the will of the people. They are trying to confuse it by using poll books, objections of persons who would have migrated, who magically voted, persons who were deceased, who would have seen voted, and all hosts of issues. They've had a flyer today talking about all of the issues in Region 1 and the fact that there are too many issues going on. And they're feeding that narrative into the base itself, and I think they're trying to confuse the process. One of the reasons why I guess the president may not want the Carter Center to be here. I don't think he believe. I should rephrase. I think they believe that they can reload CARICOM, but the CARICOM ambassador to the OAS already mentioned that CARICOM is not going to sit by idly and look and see a dictatorship emerge here in Guyana. They are not going to encourage that. So we know that CARICOM is going to be robust in this process, but I want you to address the shifting narrative. The fact that they said that it was free, fair, and credible. Now that the recount is showing clearly that there's a lot of fraud committed, especially when it comes to Region 4. When we did our comparisons with the statement of polls using the statement of recount and match that also with Mingo's declaration Region 4, we're seeing glaring evidence of fraud. They're not addressing it. We are addressing it. The leader of the OAS mission to Guyana, former Prime Minister Bruce Golding, he, in his report to the OAS, mentioned that. So we're on the right side. I want you to address that for the people of Ghana so that they can really understand who is actually crying foul on this issue.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Bruce Golding. Okay, so I'm sticking with the politics at the moment, and then I'm gonna shift over to the legal just before I conclude this part of the questioning. So when you heard Bruce Golding speak about the fraud that occurred, and he used the references to Mingo's declaration and then cross-referenced the SOPs that he would have seen and also the statements of recounts that he would have seen, it shows that Mingo's declaration was fraudulent. Now, the APNU AFC, they are cheerfully unconcerned about the fraud that occurred from Mingo. They are cheerfully unconcerned about Golding saying that there was fraud that occurred with Mingo's declaration. And what did they do as a response? They chose to attack and target Bruce Golding. We even heard that the creature, what is the name of the creature? Aubrey Norton. Desmond Hoyt had called him the creature many, many years ago when he was kicked out of the party. And you can see why, because he looks like the creature. So we had even heard him say that nothing that Bruce Golding says is credible because he wrote the United States of America over Duda's cook, forgetting very clearly that David Patterson's brother has been charged for trafficking in narcotics. So if he was wanting to discredit anybody as a result of some reference to narcotics, his own one of the party leader or the general secretary of somebody who is in the AFC, their coalition partner, his brother was charged for trafficking in narcotics. Second, there are a number of former PNC ministers who recently have been jailed as a result of their movement of illegal medical supplies. Third, when they went about attacking Bruce Golding as a political leader of Jamaica, it was in effect an attack on all Jamaicans. No political leader of any country should ever be attacking the credibility and the reputation or the integrity of any other political leader of another country. And furthermore, when Mr. Golding, former Prime Minister Golding, spoke and came here to Guyana as the head of mission for the OAS, he was speaking for the entire OAS on their electoral mission. Yes. So they are attacking the OAS themselves. So instead of addressing the issues of the allegations of fraud that he is making with evidence, instead of addressing those issues, they go into the personalized attack of the individuals. Well, guess what? He wasn't the only individual that has claimed electoral fraud in District 4. I will take you back to a joint release of the United States, the heads or the ambassadors and high commissioners for the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the European Union in their joint statement on the 6th of March said they are deeply concerned about credible allegations of electoral fraud. You can quote me on those specific words. Deeply concerned about credible allegations of electoral fraud. They have not, and this is not the first, Bruce Golding is not the first person that has spoken about electoral fraud. You've heard Kit Nascimento spoken about electoral fraud. You've had every single observer mission that has said that the declaration for Region 4 was not credible and not transparent. And that is in effect saying that they don't know how it is that this came about, because nobody knows where this spreadsheet came from in relation to the declaration for Region 4. So every single mission has in effect said that the result is not credible, but Bruce Golding is not the only one that said that this is electoral fraud. So but this is not the first time that they've done something like this. They attacked the credibility and the integrity of the Canadian High Commissioner. So this has been a pattern for anyone that is standing up against this this cabal that wants to allow themselves to get sworn in or to be the architect of this rigging process. And the reason why I say that is leading up into the election, we had many persons who came to say to us that a particular individual within GCOM had set about a course of action that would have seen the APNU AFC been declared the victors of this election, even though they did not receive the highest number of votes. And that was why you would have seen, Hugh, that we were hot on their tracks from the beginning. We knew how it is that they were going to try to rig the electoral system, and it was in the tabulation system. And many persons, we had alerted many persons in the process, and that is why when you saw that Mingo couldn't get away with the whole statements of polls being read out from a spreadsheet, which no one knows how it was created, and it was proven to be wrong on one of the days, then he just stopped the process and went in to declare the results. We had to go and get that annulled by the courts, and then that's when the famous bed sheet came about, and they moved it from Ashmin's building all the way to Kingston and put up the SOPs on the bed sheet, which nobody could see. But we have audio and visuals recording for a lot of those boxes, and that's why you're seeing so many persons are coming out and say that these results that Mingo had announced from those spreadsheets were wrong, they were fraudulent, and we even had one of the APNU AFC's polling agents wrote a long missive on their Facebook page. They said, listen, they never voted for the PVP, they voted APNU. But when they saw what they did with the polling station, his name was Jairo Rodriguez or something of that nature. His post, I shared his post on my Facebook page. He said that when he saw what Mingo announced for his polling station, he started to cry. Now, I want to shift my hat now, because you asked me about the shifting narrative, etc. You've seen how the AP and UFC have tried to discredit the election. Well, guess what discrediting the election means? It means now that they're going to throw GCOM under the bus. That's what they're going to do. So they're going to say, because they didn't get through with the rigging of the election and getting sworn in on these false declarations from Mingo, for this false declaration is GCOM. And they're going to point blame at the people at GCOM. And I want GCOM to notice, because it means that they're not your friends. AP and UAFC, they are not your friends. They may have been your business partners, or a couple individuals may have been your business partners where they may have tried to corrupt you in the process, right? A handful of people in GCOM would have been corrupted to see this false declaration be done for district number 4. But now they're throwing all of them under the bus. They're not your friends. They're not your partners. They're not your protectors. And when the time comes, they're not going to be able to save you unless you do the right thing and see that this recount goes in the right way.
Yes.
I want to touch on the legal issue now, which is
Okay,
I'm
go ahead.
putting on my legal hat now
Okay.
to speak about the credibility of the elections, because once that process is completed of putting ballots in a box in all the boxes on elections day, there is an act in the laws of Guyana called the Validity of Elections Act. Okay?
Okay.
This act outlines the only process that is available for anyone attempting to annul in elections. And it wants that process where you have completed the voting. The only way that you can annul an election is by using this act called Validity of Elections. And guess how it's done? Through a petition, but after a declaration is made by GCOM. So once we get to the end of this recount process,
Yes.
and we see, and we know we will see that the People's Progressive Party will win this election, it means that GCOM has no choice but to be able to declare, based on this recount, that the declaration for the election is that the People's Progressive Party would have won. And
Yeah.
if the AP and UAFC feel so strongly that they are so upset about the results of the election, well, they will be left no other choice but to file a petition. But guess what? Before they file the petition, ask them to publish their SOPs for Region 4.
Yes.
And I bet you they will not be able to do it, because it's going to prove to their supporters and the whole world that they have lied to their supporters, and they've lied to the Guyanese people, and they've lied to the world that they have won this election based on the SOPs that they have in their possession. They
Yeah.
are liars. They
Yeah.
will prove, this recount will prove that they are lying. And that's why they haven't published it. Because you've seen in 2015 how eager they were to get GCOM to publish their SOPs, and they publish their SOPs, etc. And now that they've lost the election, they're saying, well, they're holding it strategically. This would clear up to everyone who has a doubt or a question who had won the election.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Charles. The other question is, you've given a lot of detail there. Wouldn't it be less painful in terms of the loss for the APNO FC if they allow for the Mingo's false declarations to be discarded? Would it not be easier for them to take this loss? Because if they hold on to Mingo's declaration, it's going to be more traumatic and more painful for them, because it's an illusion. They're still believing in their head that this is actually a lawful declaration. The court already said that the declarations from Mingo were fraudulent, and they're still holding on to these fraudulent declarations. Vincent Alexander said that they're holding to abeyance, and they're just holding on to something that will not yield any good for them. So we're saying, and we're helping them, that let's discard Mingo's declarations so that we can move on with the process. So we'll have our SOPs along with the SORs. That will make things easier for both sides, more so for them. What do you say about that?
Look, I'm not dealing with logic here, okay? Because those guys are not dealing with logic. What you're saying is a very logical thing. Those guys are not dealing with logic. You know why they're not dealing with logic? Because many of them are compromised. They're compromised because they're holding on to power, or they have been promised things. They're holding on to power so that they can personally enrich themselves, or they have the other persons have been promised things so that they could personally enrich themselves. The AFC minister, I want that AFC minister to know that we know about the $90 million that you've put into your bank account in in February and March of this year, and the 400,000 US dollars that you transferred from your personal account to your other account in Texas. Okay, the other minister, the APNU minister, we know that you fronted a land up in Eccles where they purchased it for 1 million US dollars. Okay, we know about the individuals within GCOM who had received large swathes of land. Okay, we know about the compromised people. So I am not dealing with issues here of logic. Okay, we know about the land the land deals up in Mahaika area, huge tracts of land, and which minister has it. Okay, and which minister is part of that deal. And a lot of them have been doing a lot of skullduggery along the way, and that's why you see that they stay silent, or they're participating in this fraudulent rigging of elections. We know about the minister who received the $17 million inside the Palm Court. Okay, and this is just a tip of the iceberg. This is what I'm saying here is just a tip of what we know. But if at any point in time you can see that they want to continue playing more hardball and they don't want to accept the results of the election, well, we're going to release more details about these things and get specific about it, because the population will see that it's not logic that they're dealing with. These guys are already beneficiaries of electoral fraud. The fact that we are in May already and going into June, that means that they would have received 3 months, 4 months extra salaries. That's $4 million a piece. Okay, do the calculation. 4 million times 20, right? That's about almost $100 million right there that taxpayers have to pay in those 4 months extra that they're going to remain as ministers. They're already beneficiaries of electoral fraud. Now ask their supporters who are following them to the end of the earth and believing every word that they're saying, hook, line, and sinker. How much have they received in the last month? How much have they received in the last 2 months? How much have they received in the last 3 months? A lot of their supporters are struggling. I had a call up to yesterday, somebody from Haslington, that said to me that they have been a hardcore supporter of the APNU AFC. Now they can't even feed themselves and their families, and when they're reaching out to them to ask them to help them with assistance so that they could feed themselves and their families, they've been turned off. So when the supporters are not getting anything in Guyana, right? They're barely getting by, if at all. These guys are already beneficiaries of electoral fraud, and they've cost this treasury, and by June, they'll cost this treasury over $100 million. If you add up security and the maids and everything else that goes along with the utilities, it will cost us over $100 million extra, and it shouldn't have been this way. They're beneficiaries of electoral fraud already.
Thank you, Charles, for joining us. I wish we could continue, but we're out of time. It's a pleasure having you in this segment today. I hope you'll avail yourself for more discussions as the weeks go by, because we're trying to get this process to a smooth conclusion so we can bring finality to the vote, and so the will of the people of this country will emerge, because democracy shall prevail. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramson, and do enjoy evening. For those of you who joined us, thank you very much for spending the last 25 to 30 minutes with us, and do stay with us so that we can continue to update you as the days unfold. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.